What's up everyone? Alex here. For decades, players have been whisked away into the magical, mystical worlds of Final Fantasy, and with Final Fantasy 16 just on the horizon, I think it's safe to say that the series won't be truly final anytime soon. However, with this release comes a considerable amount of skepticism and uncertainty. More specifically, there have been rumblings within the fanbase with regards to how true to the series this latest entry will be. Is moving towards a more action-oriented direction taking things a bit too far? Is this really even a Final Fantasy anymore? More importantly, has the series just completely lost its identity? These, and many others like it, are just some of the more serious accusations lobbied at the series, which is celebrating its 35th anniversary this year. But in order to get at the heart of all of this, we'll need to turn back the hands of time and call in some assistance. As I am a Final Fantasy fan from the very original NES release, I see the series through a very specific lens. That's why I felt the need to bring in a friend of mine, Daniel Santos, who some of you have known from his fantastic video essays, and who is also helping me write the script for this video to share his own unique experience with it. When Daniel was younger, his first exposure to the series was none other than the infamous Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. What a way to start, right? Much to my surprise, he revealed that he actually quite enjoyed it at the time, and only learned years later of its less than favorable reputation. That's not to say that he has some hot take that the game is secretly great or anything, just that this was not only his first foray into the series, but also a game that served as one of the first RPGs he's ever played. Fast forward through high school, and Daniel had managed to beat Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VIII, 9, 10, and Tactics, all of which turned him into a genuine Final Fantasy fan. While he can't profess to have been there since the very beginning, much like myself, the series was there for him during his formative years, and as a result, left a significant impact. Nowadays, with the exception of Final Fantasy XI, he's played through every mainline entry and has completed a good number of them. While not necessarily an authority, on the level of some superfans who have 100%ed every title, his exposure to the series clearly goes beyond that of a casual fan, given that he poured hundreds upon hundreds of hours cumulatively across the franchise, replayed certain entries multiple times, and have completed the important content therein. All of this is to say that when Daniel looks at Final Fantasy XVI, he does not see an entry that has forgotten the series' roots, nor a game that is muddying the identity of the franchise. Rather, he sees it as one that is triumphantly celebrating what we've all come to know and love. Now that you have a better idea of where he's coming from, let's talk about the hot button topic here. Is turning the series into an action game with only one controllable protagonist going against the core tenets of the series? When you take a look at nearly every facet of the franchise, from combat, progression, character writing, storytelling, and setting, all of them have undergone a complete shift at one point or another. We've gone from medieval fantasy to sci-fi themes, turn-based to active time battle, and job system to materia slots. If there's any one thing consistent about this series, is how inconsistent it is, and I believe that's partly why it has persisted for as long as it has. The willingness to buck convention and to try out new and interesting ideas has kept things fresh. Granted, with varying degrees of success, but even the less than favored entries still played their part and contributed to the series in their own way. While it is true that there have undoubtedly been critical paradigm shifts from entry to entry, I doubt that we will ever see a numbered Final Fantasy game that is a military-based first-person shooter or a historically accurate real-time strategy game. At the end of the day, there are logical places where these games can and cannot go. With all this in mind, is Final Fantasy becoming more of an action game really so out of left field? Considering that both Final Fantasy XV and Final Fantasy VII Remake have already dipped their toes in the water, it comes across to me as the next logical step in order to keep the brand fresh. Now, it would be remiss of me to not mention that even those entries were met with some controversy. After all, many of us grew up with the series predominantly being turn-based, something that has been closely identified with the franchise for the majority of its history. Whether we're talking about entries that have been purely turn-based, like Final Fantasy X, or the games that utilize ATB like the ones from Final Fantasy IV to IX, this has been a series staple for quite some time. Despite that, is it really fair to say that it was the combat that solely defined the series and nothing else? When I reflect on the entirety of Final Fantasy, I think about the memorable characters, its mystical towns, dungeons, and landscapes, as well as its thematic storytelling, and not so much the combat. That's not to say that I don't love turn-based combat either. Heck, I'm one of those weirdos that vastly prefers the gameplay of the original Final Fantasy VII over the remake's action RPG combat. But my point is that to assert that the combat, a singular aspect of these games, is what defines the series, just doesn't quite sit right with me. The thing is, though, that all of this is based on my own perspective on the series, which just so happens to be shared by Daniel, despite starting his own journey with Mystic Quest. As such, I can't tell you how to feel or how you should personally identify what Final Fantasy is or isn't, because at the end of the day, it simply isn't our place to do so. It's fair to say that many watching this video have their own storied history with the franchise. Maybe you grew up with your NES copy of the original Final Fantasy, or you discovered a series later on in life and went back to play the most well-known entries. Regardless of the road you took, it was specifically your personal journey that defined it for you. So while it might not sit well with me to say that the combat is what defines the series, it's completely fair and valid if you feel that it does, because maybe that's how you develop your own bond with it. And the last thing that I want to do is to take away from how you felt. With all this said, I want your takeaway to be this. Final Fantasy means something different to all of us, and what the identity of the franchise isn't some hard and fast metric that can be easily quantified. It's a feeling. Someone else can make their case and feel confident about what they presented, but if it doesn't gel with how you've personally viewed the series, that's okay. As long as we respect each other's perspectives and understand that this difference stems from our own unique history with it, I think it'll be easier to accept when people express how these games resonated with them in ways that don't necessarily align with our own unique points of view. And maybe, just maybe, we get to learn a lot about each other and ourselves in return. With all that said, I want to hear what you think. How did you get into Final Fantasy? What is Final Fantasy to you? Post your thoughts in the comments below and let's talk about it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.